Let's do the best bits first. For me, without a doubt, the best moment of Bahrain Friday was when Max Verstappen was following Lewis in the second session, by which time it was under lights, it was dark, as the race will be. If P1 was in the afternoon. Max was following Lewis and came on the radio as they came out of 10. And if you don't know about turn 10, we got the two videos out currently, which tell you all about the importance of turns 9, 10 in Bahrain. In my view, two of the best bits of road in Formula One, and the explanation is there. Anyway, kind of justifying everything I'm saying in those two videos, Max is following Lewis, and as he comes out at 10, he says, wow, who's that in front? He's great drift going through 9. And of course, what he's doing is watching Lewis doing exactly what we're talking about, going slightly wide of the entry, almost on the marbles. And at this moment, Lewis is on a set of Pirelli test tyres. He has no grip whatsoever. So obviously the thing's right on the edge. I've got to correct myself here. 6th gear, not 7th or 8th, 6th gear through that kink, but it's still really quick. And he's on the marbles. He's got this drift and gets the car stopped beautifully for 10, of course. And impressing Max so much, he has to get on the radio to find out, make sure that it is Lewis and not Valtteri who's doing that in front of him. Of course, Max does it in a tone of voice which suggests, well, I know what he's doing because I'm doing the same thing, but that's really impressive. I love that moment. And it's typical of Max, I think, to think outside the box like that and to be observing things like that. It's very easy, I imagine, for current Formula One drivers to get into the syndrome of, I'm the best guy out there, and if I'm not quick, it must be the car, it must be this, must be that. But there's Max in a very subliminal way actually paying a massive compliment to Lewis and really justifying everything we're saying about that entry to the all-important turn 10, which leads onto the back straight. As predicted, sadly, we didn't really get any decent television views of that section of road because although they have some lovely overhead shots, they're using them coming out of 8 and on the acceleration run into 9, and then they always cut to sort of low shots and you can't get any feel really for where they are. But a few of the onboards have given us a bit of a clue. But things basically ran to pattern. Within sort of 10 minutes, Valtteri had locked up on almost three successive laps, doing exactly what we said in the video, just giving the car too much angle because he's going slightly closer to the apex of turn 9 than Lewis, and he's asking much more of the car as he's braking then into 10. Got the lockups and basically lost the lap. Lewis, Max looked really good. The other driver, I've got to say, looked fabulous all day, I thought, there. And basically for the lap was Sebastian Vettel. I thought he looked really good. Lewis type approach to turn 10, very wide apex. I will still say that I think he has too many straight lines and not enough curve just on the transition points, but compared with Lewis or Max, but Sebastian looking really good, I thought, all day. And he's running with a much wider bandwidth, if you like, going into 10. He's got much more room to maneuver if things go slightly wrong than even Charles, I thought, today, and certainly compared with virtually everybody else. And there were a couple of times when there was smoke coming up from the left front, and technically, I guess it was a lockup, enough for the TV producers to say, oh, wow, let's replay that. But if you look at it, it's the wheel's still revolving in both cases with Sebastian Vettel, and he's not losing any time. And that's because he's got the car in a beautiful position for 10, and he's basically braking with all four tyres flat to the road, and he locked up. But it wasn't a dangerous lockup. Sorry, it wasn't a time-consuming lockup in the same way that Valtteri's were, or dare I say it, Romain Grosjean, who didn't disappoint today and did exactly what he's always been doing there and just constantly braking right on the edge, relying on his reflexes, and when it doesn't go right, cursing and swearing and blaming everybody but himself, dare I say it. It's a little bit rough, I guess. I'm sure the Haas is not a great car, but we are getting a bit tired of every time he's slow or there's some problem, it's always the car is terrible, it's undrivable, and come on, Roma. Yeah, so turn 9-10, the highlight again for me, and it is kind of the key to the lap. And when you see drivers like Vettel so good through there, yeah, this guy's set for a very good weekend in Bahrain. My only other thought about the whole turn 9-10 thing is that because it is so revealing and because it is so critical, I'm astounded that the teams with all the telemetry and the data gathering that they have don't have for want of a better word, spotters out there basically saying, look, do you realize you're doing this or not doing this because it could be important in the race? Of course, you've got to say, and I did say this in the videos, that if you've got a good set of tyres with good grip, let's say a new set of softs or a set of softs which feel really good and it's only 2 or 3 laps old, most drivers are going to be able to get around Bahrain pretty quickly. And you'll be able to get through turn 9 and 10, even if you use too much road on the apex of 9 and you're not giving yourself enough braking point. There's still going to be enough grip in the car, and the car's still going to feel good enough for most drivers to get away with it. That's what we saw, I thought, a lot today with Pierre Gasly, who was definitely, I mean, I don't know what is happening there, but if I was at AlphaTauri right now, I would be sending people out to 9-10 saying, look at what Max, Vettel and Lewis are doing there, and look what you're doing, Pierre. You're probably at least 2/3 of the car to the left of Lewis in the middle of turn 9. And that's super critical because that then sets up the braking area, as we've said, for turn 10. So Pierre's getting it really good through there. He's so good and he's so precise and he's got so much finesse that he can get away with it. But the problem is, under pressure in the race, lap after lap after lap, as the grip goes away, is he going to be able to sustain that? I thought through there, actually today, Daniel Kvyat looked a little bit better, had a slightly bigger sweet spot going through 9, braking for 10 than Pierre Gasly, which is unusual. And just while on the subject of Daniel Kvyat, was not impressed again by A, the swearing down the radio, and B, what he was swearing about. He was swearing that we have a track limits rule. I mean, this is ridiculous. If you don't like the track limits rule, don't go over the track limits. Simple. Anyway, that's a little rant on that one. So anyway, I think it does behove the teams to have people watching on critical corners because it's obviously not showing up on the telemetry. And then we had, I thought, one of the strangest instructions from an engineer to a driver that, well, I have to say, that I've ever heard. It was to Esteban Ocon, the Renault driver. And they obviously had some sort of brake temperature issue going on because the instruction was, Esteban, we want your initial braking needs to be harder and come out of the brakes sooner. Now, make of that what you will. I mean, I'll only tell you this, that Rob Wilson has spent the last 25, 30 years trying to get most of the drivers with whom he works not to brake really hard in the initial application. Gentle, firm is what it's all about. Warm the car. Don't make the car judder as you hit the brakes. And I'm sure, well, I hope that Esteban is good enough to be able to have filtered that out of the instruction, because the instruction as it was just plant your foot on the brake really hard, even at high speed. I mean, what is that all about? That is absolutely counter to what great driving of a Grand Prix car is all about. And as for coming out of the brakes early, yeah, massive fan of that, but only if you're on the absolute limit and you realize that you've got a little bit more pace you can have in the car, and the way to do that is to come out sooner rather than give yourself an aggressive platform by braking too late. Now that's great, but as an instruction, a general instruction, come out of the brake sooner, brake harder in your initial application. I mean, I just hope he wasn't doing that at every corner, because, and just to finish this rant as well, how drivers come out of the brakes and how you hit the brakes initially, hit being the wrong word, how you apply the brakes initially is different every lap, or should be, based on grip levels, fuel load levels, ambient temperature, track temperature, all the things that come into play. Nothing is ever the same. So just to sort of hammer the brakes and then come out sooner as a dictum, I don't know how that would work. Anyway, I was astonished by that, and well, I was just astonished. I can't say any more. The other great moment of the day also came, would you believe, from Max Verstappen coming out of the last corner in the morning session. Beautiful 360. We don't see many perfect 360s in Formula One these days, but the back end came out. He knew that he'd lost it on the curb, but almost as soon as he knew he'd lost it, he was gunning the throttle and just controlling the 360. Lovely to watch. Okay, you could say, well, he should be able to do that, shouldn't he? But, you know, I just love watching drivers do 360s. I love watching them doing things that I know I could not do in a million years. And of course, it has to be said, he kept the car perfectly within the confines of the racetrack, Daniel Kvyat. And then we had Alex Albon's shunt, which is basically the counterpoint of what Max had been doing out of the last corner. He ran wide. He had Pierre Gasly in his mirrors. I'm not quite sure whether he'd passed Gasly or whether Gasly was putting pressure on him, but no doubt there was a little bit of feeling there. This was the guy that used to be at Red Bull. This is the driver that's doing so well at AlphaTauri now, and he's there. And there's Alex Albon in the Red Bull A team in the second car, or the other car. And he ran wide coming out of the last corner. He's on the red tyre. He's going pretty much on it. It's a push lap, as they say. And instead of just sort of feathering the throttle and living with it and just bringing the car back on the track, he kept the throttle on, lost the back end, overcorrected, no grip at all there on the runoff area, and then into the guardrail. Big shunt. Pretty crass error, got to be said, for a driver of that quality. Well, let me put, for a team of that quality, employing a driver who should be of that quality, that was a pretty crass mistake. And again, I'm only stating the obvious here, but if Lance Stroll, I just saw a stat, they put up a stat that Lance Stroll, apart from the two Mercedes drivers, has led the most laps in Formula One this year, and of course he's the only driver outside the Mercedes factory team who get a pole. Now, if Lance Stroll is doing as much work as he is with Rob Wilson, why is it that Alex Albon, who lives in England for Pete's sake, hasn't done a single day with Rob Wilson? Is it because he thinks that his driving is so good he doesn't need to improve? Well, I'm sorry, Alex, whenever you try to get that little gap to Max Verstappen, you always seem to trip. And this was a very good example of that. And I'm just amazed, to be honest. This is a video about me being amazed, but I'm amazed that by now Alex Albon hasn't found the time to go and do days with Rob Wilson. Because it's working for Lance Stroll, and therefore, in my opinion, it would certainly work for Alex Albon. And if you want proof of that, Alex, just talk to Adrian Newey. He's a great Rob Wilson believer. Moving on from that, I suppose one of the big questions in my mind going into the second session was whether or not Ferrari were going to have a quick weekend, because they weren't quick in the first session, but there was so much going on with the Pirelli tyre testing, the 2021 tyre testing, that you couldn't really draw any conclusions. So are we going to have a weekend where Ferrari are going to be kind of on the pace or not? That was the big question. And I have to say, I don't really know the answer, because when he was out doing his soft tyre run quite early in FP2, Charles Leclerc got a lot of traffic and didn't get a lap in. He was about 0.3 slower than Sebastian. He put in a pretty good lap, kind of midfieldish, high midfieldish type of lap. There was also a weird incident in the morning when Charles had been catching Pierre Gasly, and then at turn 13, Gasly was really slow, and Charles basically had to run off the road to avoid him, and then sort of gave a few hand gestures, as I think most drivers would. It was kind of an odd thing. But I make this point because in the second session, Pierre Gasly started waving his hands and getting very upset because Valtteri Bottas did exactly the same thing to him. There seemed to be some weird things going on track today, with drivers not really either unable to see anything out of their mirrors. Perhaps it's because of the lighting and the darkness, I don't know. But there seemed to be a few incidents where drivers just weren't paying attention, and both of them involved Pierre Gasly, interestingly enough. Another driver I should mention who looked really good through turns 9 and 10 on his lap with the soft tyre was Daniel Ricciardo. Really, really good. I mean, he was there with Sebastian. He was Sebastian indeed, with some slightly softer edges to his driving. He looked superb through there. Lots and lots of time to get the car stopped and turned in. I'd be very, very surprised if he doesn't have a great weekend now on the back of that. You'd say, well, how can Windsor say that just based on what they're doing on one corner? Well, it's all to do with getting the platform of the lap. And if you've got the car stable on entry into turn 10 and you're getting lovely exits down the straight there, basically you got the lap sus. That's my opinion. I think that is the key to Bahrain. There are a couple of other nice bits. Actually, one of the nice bits that I'd forgotten about was coming out of 11, the next corner, the change of direction for 12. And it's kind of tempting with 11 just to come out of 11 and then let the car do its thing, and then you got 12 looming. But the key there, of course, in that transition is to create your own little, what Rob would call your flat car area, where you're doing the transition when the car is flat on the road, and watching drivers creating that flat spot. I thought Lance Stroll actually was doing a very good job out of 11 into 12. He looked very good there. Speaking of Lance, I should also just mention Sergio Perez. To me, he looks like a driver this weekend who's really quick. I think both racing points look really good with reasonable fuel loads in the afternoon session. The car looks to be very, very good. Sergio is a driver who's absolutely on it in terms of this is what he's going to do. This is where he's going to place the car. But I've used that word bandwidth once already. I'm going to use it again. But I don't think his bandwidth of operation, like Pierre Gasly's, is particularly wide. I think that if things change, the variables come into play, I think Sergio might be in trouble, particularly, obviously, through 9 and 10. That was pretty clear. He's not giving himself quite as much room as even Lance for the braking into 10. And I can't reiterate enough how important that is when the tyres start to go away and when a driver's under pressure. But nonetheless, Sergio looking really good, really confident, the team looking good. And yeah, just saying to everybody, I think, again, are you really sure Sebastian's going to do a lot better than me in that car? But equally, Sebastian will be looking now at the Racing Point and he'll be thinking, yeah, I'm really pleased that I'm going there, Merc engines. There was a dog on the track at one point. Lewis was concerned that it might be one of his, but it wasn't. It was a sort of one of those small, relatively yappy, collie-like things. It was probably a mix, knowing Bahrain, and he got away. It was all right, but the red came out just after they rejoined the track, after the Alex Albon shunt, but they found him, and I say him, it might well have been a her, and everything ended happily on that side. But that is something, of course, that is a function of putting on these races when we are, how we are, and in countries like Bahrain and Turkey as well, of course. So, Formula One is just girding its loins, I think, as we go into the weekend for variables like that, unexpected variables. Speaking of which, it did actually rain a little bit coming out of the last corner in the morning session in Bahrain. Can you believe it? I say morning UK time. It was obviously afternoon their time, about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And they got a bit of rain in Bahrain. Yeah. There were some shots in the Red Bull garage after the Alex Albon shunt. And in some of them, you could see Yuri Vips looking very, very quick, young driver, from Estonia, who is a Red Bull driver, done very well in Formula 3. He's been trying to do Super Formula in Japan this year, but hasn't really come to much. But he is quick. And it's interesting to see him in the garage so much. And in my view, he would be worth trying, at least certainly giving a proper test to, for that other car. I think he's really good, really talented. And that's all I'm going to say on that, really. I think a lot of people will say, oh yeah, but what about experience? Well, I think actual talent and speed and natural feel is probably more important for the other car than experience, in inverted commas. Final shout out, Robert Kubica, P13 in George Russell's Williams Mercedes this morning. George probably would have been there, but he wasn't that quick in the afternoon. Nicholas Latifi actually looked pretty strong this afternoon. But anyway, for Robert Kubica, very nice to see. Well done, Robert. More to come. I'll do another video tomorrow after qualifying, and then of course we'll do one Sunday night for the race. See you then.